I don't think that it's very helpful apologetically to try to defend Christianity on the way that, or on the terms that, say, an atheist gives it to us. They've set this up, they've set the rules, and it's a zero-sum game. You're always going to lose on this front. He looked at atheism, and the way that he figured atheism was that he called it artless and he called it childish.
What's up, everybody, and thanks for watching People You Should Know. And I think this is the perfect show for you if you have ever struggled to talk with someone who was an atheist or just deep into the science of things and just felt like, man, I don't know how to answer their questions. I don't know how to help them understand who God is and to take faith in science and all this. If that's been a struggle for you, listen to this episode with Dr. Chris Palmer. We're going to be talking about what's more important than being able to argue them about science. When a secularist is talking to you, what's the best thing that you can do? Let's get into this. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for watching People You Should Know. I'm here with Dr. Chris Palmer. He is the dean. If I get any of these things wrong, go ahead and correct me on it. But he's the dean of Barnett College of Ministry and Theology at Southeastern University. He's also a part of the team at TheosU and has a course called Jordan Peterson, Friend or Foe, that I think is really going to help you. If you want to go check that out, we do have a link in this video. And if you want to get that, make sure you go check that out. But he was talking about Jordan Peterson, and it led to some conversations about what the world actually needs when it comes to secularism, when it comes to interacting with your faith with them. And I think it's going to be a really great conversation for you to build your faith and walk in that. Dr. Chris Palmer, thank you so much for being with us.
Joshua, thank you for having me, man, and pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, thank you. And do you go by Dr. Palmer, Dr. Chris? Chris.
You know, whatever.
CP.
That's fine.
What do you go?
You call it whatever you want, man. I'm sure that's setting the watermark high. I've gotten called a lot worse than that. So
all right. All right. So you're over at SEU,
mm-hmm.
And how long have you been there for?
So I've been with Southeastern since July. So we're about to have graduation. So this will be my first evolution around the sun with SEU. And so about a year, you could say a full academic year. And here based in Lakeland, Florida, where our 88-acre campus is at. And it's been great. It's been all around just fantastic. And we're doing a lot of fun things and being innovative with theology. And we're very student driven. So we want to make sure that we provide customizable education for students with a lot of depth, and think of the students in mind when we do that. So we've been pretty successful at it.
Awesome. So if you want to get a Christian education, why don't you check out SEU, and man, maybe you'll see Dr. Palmer while you're there.
You'll see me around here somewhere, looking at the gators outside my office. We have a little lake out here, and there's alligators in there, so that's always fun.
Is it fenced off?
No, but in Florida, that's just how you live down here. You coexist with the reptiles.
Where'd you move there from?
I'd moved here from Nashville. I was up in Nashville with the guys at Theos for 2 years. Before that, I was in Palm Springs, California, and then originally from Southeast Michigan, about 30 miles outside of Detroit.
Okay, so you went from what's Nashville? Big bugs to big reptiles?
Man,
is that what it?
We went from big bugs and big allergies to big reptiles. That's a good way of saying it.
Nashville's got bad allergies.
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I'm struggling with that right now in where I am. So
come to Florida, man. You'll be sitting good.
Okay, I was actually I wasn't gonna ask about that unless it got brought up. But so allergies are good there?
Yeah, they're better. I mean, we do have pollen allergies, but I think for the most part, it's way better than other places. At least from my experience. I don't hear people fussing as much about that. We just have hurricanes that tear our houses apart.
That's true. I'd say that's what I love about living here. We do get fires, but they're pretty good at putting them out. And you have control over a fire to a degree. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You can do something.
Yeah.
Hurricane, you just buckle up.
Yep, no control. It's rolling the dice every hurricane season. So my first year down here, this year when I came down, we had 3 major hurricanes. The first one since 1920 to hit Tampa directly head on. So they blame me for bringing that.
Wow. Well, hopefully Hopefully this year, much better. But hey, I want to ask something that's just a little more personal. I like when people talk about what they're passionate about. What's something you're doing right now that you're just finding a lot of fulfillment in, or a topic, or just something that you're passionate about right now? That's
Yeah, so higher ed, I'm very passionate about that. When I finished my doctorate, I jumped right into higher ed because I was super excited about it, and then allowing students to have a experience with education. I mean, oftentimes it's thought of, man, I can never go back and get my degree because it's so expensive, and so we're working adamantly at SU to lower the price and not at all touch the quality of education. Aside from that, I just actually finished a manuscript on a book that I'm writing for Zondervan that comes out in May 2026. And the book is called The World Without God, Finding Meaning in an Age of Despair. And so that took me about 8 months, 9 months to work on that. Started working on it directly after I finished my doctorate, and manuscript's done and it's being edited. It'll be for release in May 2026, a year from now. So I really enjoyed that project and felt it turned out really well.
all right. That's great. And I mean, I think it actually dives right into what we're talking about here. But also, when that comes out, I mean, please let us know. We love to put that out there, promote it. How many pages
Sure.
is it?
So it's about 50 to 55,000 words, so it'll be 210, 220 pages
Okay.
about. Yeah.
Okay. Good
Nice read.
deal.
It reads through real nicely. I wanted to make philosophy and a theological engagement with philosophy very digestible and easy to read, and narrative in form, and even creative narrative that kind of has conversations with some of our favorite philosophers that we don't always engage deeply. So this would be a real good way into that, and thinking about how that philosophy is shaped us as a society, and how we as believers can have an engagement with it that's constructive.
No, I love that, and that's I enjoy philosophy. I enjoy just deep thought. So I'll be picking that up. So
Cool,
let's get
cool.
into this. Let's get into this.
Okay, let's do
Um,
it.
I think that secularism has kind of set itself up as this kind of impenetrable wall of reason that atheists and whatnot, they'll stand and kind of look down their noses at Christians. And how do we as people of faith, do you think, combat this? What does that look like in today's age?
Yeah, so I always talk to students about this. I'm teaching a class right now called Digital Technology and Nihilism, and this is a question that keeps coming up: is what do we do about those that are secular and non-believers, or even more agnostic? I think a lot of the atheism. Justin Brierley has a lot of good work on this, but he talks about how just staunch militant atheism is kind of cringe at this point. I was with a philosopher who is graduating with his PhD from Boston College, and he brought up a really good point. He said that hanging out with friends all over Cambridge, up there in Massachusetts, people from MIT, Harvard, and those people he goes to the beach with, out of all those friends, only one of them is actually really a militant atheism. They all are, seeking some sort of spirituality, alternative fringe spirituality, but everything they do kind of points to something beyond just "there's no God, deal with it" type stuff. And I think that we've kind of been around that sun before, and it's left people feeling quite hopeless. And when we had the new atheists, the Four Horsemen, as they call them, Hitchens and Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris, I think they were very good rhetoricians. I mean, they're very compelling to listen to. I enjoy listening to Christopher Hitchens because he's so snarky and smart, but I don't agree with him on things. And David Bentley Hart's pointed out that they make poor historians. So they're basically constructing a narrative around Christianity that isn't so, and they kind of toss that out. One of the things that one of my friends pointed out to me, and I thought was really good, is that as he's read the philosophers, and he sees them rejecting Christianity, he really doesn't see that they're rejecting Christianity on Christianity's terms. It's kind of they're rejecting Christianity on whatever terms they've constructed about Christianity, the history
Right.
they've set up about it, the way they look at Christianity, but they're not really rejecting Jesus of Nazareth the way that he's presented in the text, or the way that a great, robust theological construction of Christ would be. So he finds that problematic. So I don't think that it's very helpful apologetically to try to defend Christianity on the way that, or on the terms that, say, an atheist gives it to us. I think it's more about calling into question the way that they're constructing that, the way they're setting that up, and then maybe our best effort moving forward is to really get them to question their own way into that.
Hey, if you want a way to share your faith and let people know what you believe in just a really easy way, I want to encourage you to get some 418 gear. We have apparel that is just out there telling people, "This, I'm a follower of Jesus," right? We got our champion shirts. We have our I bring the flavor shirts and sweatshirts. We have just Jesus people, right? One of our best sellers, Jesus people, is out there. Grab these shirts, grab these crew necks, grab the hats. Show people that you're a follower of Jesus. We'll see you over there, 418gear.com. Go check it out.
In their own systems, I don't necessarily think playing the defensive is always helpful. I see a lot of debates that go awry. Answers aren't really given, or there's no success in proving God or answering those sort of questions. It may be like David Bentley Hart says, that the atheists are the delusional ones in the way they've set up and constructed God.
Okay, so a lot of young Christians are scared to share their faith because they don't think they'll have answers. They don't have answers that they can reason through. So how does that look when you're saying not to go on the defensive, but what does it look like for a young Christian to, like, all right, I'm gonna actually, like,
So
you're gonna have to prove this.
Yeah, so I don't think that Christians should feel the responsibility to prove anything. Okay, so modernity is calling the shots right now because we're a product that's come from the Enlightenment, and during the Enlightenment, okay, there was a move towards rationality in the way that people thought about God, and God was put on the chopping block. You either prove him with empirical science or he's not real, and not just God, anything else. If you can't prove it, it doesn't exist, and there's no need to believe it. And that's deeply problematic right away, because then God, in order for him to be who he says he's in Scripture, must stand the test of human scrutiny, and that's just not the way that it's set up. And so the pressure is that Christians face is, well, I have to prove God on modernism's terms. And I would say, well, if you're going to try to do it on modernism's terms, you're going to lose every time. You're in their battlefield, you're on their playing field. They've set this up, they've set the rules, and it's a zero-sum game. You're always going to lose on this front. And I would say that, that's why you feel so intimidated about it, because really the impossibility of the task of proving it the way they're asking you to prove it. And so it's a fixed game. And I would say that I don't think that's how that we should be prioritize explaining God to the world, is through a set of syllogisms or rationale that tries to answer modernism. I don't think you can do it.
Okay. So what would you say is the right way? Like if you're talking to somebody, and especially a young person, right? So if you're talking to somebody who's, in college, they're getting all this stuff fed to them about, science, this, that, and the other, biology, and you're just having a conversation. What's your approach?
Yeah, so I think the best approach that, I'm going to pull something up here, the best approach that I would suggest is to understand that, the way that Christians start, the way that we start with our text and what we find holy and what we find sacred is we start from the point of divine revelation. I mean, we admit that we're people of faith, and the way that the text has come to us is through divine revelation. And I'm not sure that there's any way that you can prove it in the way that perhaps professors or people in the ivory tower are asking you to do it. But I think that the assurance that you find in that is that doesn't really invalidate what we're trying to do. I mean, we're people of faith. So I always point to Karl Barth. I mean, Karl Barth, he looked at atheism, and the way that he figured atheism was that he called it artless and he called it childish. And the way that he's saying that is because it's really nothing other than just kind of deconstructing or just pulling apart religion, and it doesn't really offer you anything at all to construct. And so there's nothing about it that is intelligible. It's just, hey, you're not right, and deal with it. But that's not how Christians really operate. Christians start from the point of, we had a personal experience. We've encountered Jesus of Nazareth. He has been made real to us in a way that we believe it's the Holy Spirit, and we come from the text. This is just where we start. So we start in different places. And I don't think we're ever going to be able to reconcile that. But again, I don't think that invalidates what we're attempting to say. So I always try to tell my students, take the pressure off of yourself in trying to prove God, because you're never going to be able to do it. You have to understand that if you've had an experience with God that you're talking about, that came from a personal experience, and that's the starting point, not some empirical truth about Christianity. That's not how we start. That's not how Paul talks about how we start. That's not New Testament Christianity. Christianity comes from, if you will, encounter or experience, and we move forward from there. And there are things that we are unable to answer. We can get into the theodicy question. We can talk about suffering. We can talk about things that we may not have the answers to, but our faith still works in spite of the fact that we don't have answers. Now, atheists might say we're crazy for that, but it's something that people of faith are actually willing to live with. And that's not to say that Christianity doesn't have anything to offer the world. It has a lot to offer the world. And that's one argument that you could make. Tom Holland makes a huge argument for that in his recent book, Dominion. That doesn't prove Christianity. That doesn't prove God, but it does make a case that it's better to serve God and better to follow the teachings of Scripture. But again, it doesn't really prove anything. So Karl Barth, his estimation of atheism was that we were just supposed to make a better theological case for Christ and live our lives as witnesses instead of trying to engage the world or engage modernists on modernist terms. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. So, one, taking the pressure off of going, it's not your job to make people believe in Jesus. It's your job to represent Christ. It's your job to walk out what you believe. And then I guess taking Paul's perspective of, it's the foolish things that confound the wise. It is the, it looks foolish like foolishness to the world, but it is the wisdom of God. And it brings salvation. Okay. Well, I think that is helpful because we are trying to play their game. And I was having a conversation with a young man, very bright kid, and he said he's a social Christian, but he doesn't believe that Jesus is, God and everything, but he likes what it brings. And
yeah, and Barth would point that out. Barth said this, I have the quote here. He says, atheism lives in and by negation. It can only break down and take away, and therefore it is exposed to the constant danger of finishing at a dead end. And I think that your friend you're talking about is sort of proving that point. I mean, what do you get at the end of atheism? You don't have anything. You're left with absolutely nothing.
right.
And so what does he have to do? He has to go borrow from another system that he thinks makes sense without accepting the system wholesale. So first, he's doing that because morally, socially, he's finding himself at a dead end, because what does atheism actually have to offer? Barth says nothing. That's why it's childish. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that is a question. If you're watching this, I think that is a question that you may even pose to them is like, okay, so let's just say you're right. What does that mean for life? What does that mean as a person? How should you live your life based off of this? And if it's not going to be complete anarchy and just do what you want, why not?
Yep.
And what are you basing that off of?
Yeah, exactly. So younger Christians, they could go to what Karl Barth said. I include this in my book. He says he really believed that Christianity didn't need to out-argue atheism. Because again, it's like an atheist is coming saying, hey, you have to play these games. You have to answer empirically, or your God does not exist. Well, who said that you could create the rules? I get that works for some things, but is it really everything in life? Is it really rational? I mean, are we not more than our rationale? Is falling in love a logical decision? Are things that we do always logical? I mean, when you decided to marry somebody or fall in love, did you sit there and say, oh, I'm going to fall in love with this person? I think that's an example that actually speaks to the fact that we're human beings that are more than just our rational faculties. I mean, Slavoj Žižek makes this argument very well. He what he says is when he looks at Christian arguments for Christianity, he thinks the worst thing that a Christian can do is say, the reason that I have decided to follow Christ is because I've looked at all of the religions, I've kind of teed them all up, and I've decided that Christianity is the best one. And he'd say that's not really the reason people follow Jesus. He says that people or follow or choose a religion. It comes because they've had some sort of experience that draws them to it. And that sort of experience that draws you to it produces within you the power to witness. And so Bart comes back on that and says that's exactly where Christians need to focus, is not play modernist games. You know, a lot of people today want to play those games on social media because it's clout chasing and it's building a name for themselves as more intelligent. And Bart wouldn't want anything to do with that. What he said is that Christianity doesn't need to outthink atheism, it just needs to outlive atheism. And that in and of itself is an argument. And rationalism does not like that. People don't like that. But look at your friend that you're talking about. When Christianity is outlived, he ends up choosing their system as a moral framework, which just goes to show that living Christianity is enough for people to begin to at least start making movements towards it. Bart said this. He said, since a Christianity that on being attacked by one professor automatically required a defense by another would not be worthy of the name. And since real Christianity has always been its own best defense against its assailants, and even more its own defendants, how am I to come to its defense? So what is he saying here? You can make all the arguments that you want, but the best argument you can make, maybe the only argument that you can make, is that when you start putting it into motion, you have a way better life that atheists will start moving over to when they find themselves at a dead end. That's why atheists that are online today, they can't stop talking about Christianity. They keep going back to it. Look, leave it alone. If you're so unconvinced by it, just leave it alone. But don't come over here and start borrowing its moral frameworks as an atheist and say, well, this is a good moral framework, but I can't prove God. My proposition to them would be like, hey, why don't you just chill out for a minute with all the rationalism and stop worshiping the God of modernity and empiricism for a second and think about where that all is going to end up leading anyway. I mean, think about it. We have all this technology that's out there. We're having a race to Mars. It's a horse race now. Who's going to get there? Blue Origin or is SpaceX going to get there? And are we going to colonize Mars? What the heck would we do if we got to Mars? I mean, what are we going to do when we get up there? We're going to set up, everybody's, oh, the world is so great. We're going to Mars. That doesn't answer the meaning question. So we get to Mars. Now what? What do we teach our kids? What do we talk about? What do we pass on to people? Why did we even do this? For what purpose? Well, for the sake of humanity. But it doesn't answer those existential deep questions that we have regarding our own meaning, our own existence, and our own purpose. Robert Pippin, he talks about this a lot. He's a philosopher from the University of Chicago. He was on a recent podcast, and he made this point. I think he made it really well when he said that Nietzsche would think that, you know, doing this, building technology of these proportions is the most nihilistic thing, the most destructive thing that we can really do. It's just distracting ourselves from the real questions that we really want to answer, not how far can we go in the universe, not trying to explore space, but really trying to explore, like, why are we here and why are we living? And it doesn't seem like we can answer that. So modernity, it's given to us penicillin, it's given to us robotic surgeries and technology that's kept our lives moving forward. We have greater lifespans. But modernity's kept our lives more robust and you know, longer lifespans, but we really don't know what to do with our lives while we have them. I'll share what Athanasius said. Athanasius is a church father. He believed that the evidence provided by the presence of a new people in the world, a Christian community that really knew what it was about and how it remained true to its distinctives, was the best argument for Christianity. A new people in the world that remain true to its distinctives. That's going to be the argument. But it would think about the words of Christ. They'll know you by their fruits. They'll see that you've loved one another. They'll know that you've loved me. And there's something deeply convicting about that. I'll give you an example from my own life. I was on an airplane. There was, I did my doctoral work on theodicy, the problem of suffering. And there's really no way to answer that question as a Christian. Every single podcast I see a Christian get on with an atheist, I always want to. I've told friends before, don't get into the suffering question and try to answer it their way, because you're gonna get. There's no way you're gonna answer that question, and if
Right.
you are, you'll be the first. And we're talking about some really heavy thinkers that have tried to do it. Who do you think you're gonna do it? And I hear all the arguments, and I'm thinking to myself, just get to the suffering question, and let's make this quick. And they always die the death. And so I'm sitting on an airplane, having gone through all this stuff in my mind for 6 years, and a woman sits down next to me. Now I'm a Christian, but I like to be snarky, and I like to kind of poke at people sometimes. Unfortunately, I get that from my days at Theos, I suppose. And she sits down, and we're in the bulkhead. Now, if you've ever sat in the bulkhead, you know that they have these giant seat belts that are padded with leather. I don't know why they have those. They just do. They're better seat belts. And she puts the seatbelt on, and she's got this cheerful look on her face. She's bright-eyed. She's bushy. She's radiant with something. I mean, she's just glowing. And she's so nice and sweet. And she looks at me and she goes, well, I guess, God's looking out for us if the plane goes down. And because we have better seatbelts. So what I said to her was, yeah, I guess he likes us better than everybody else on the plane. And touche, like that's the suffering question right there. I just hit her with, she basically came up with a theodicy. God's protecting us, but he's not protecting everybody else on the plane. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a really bad argument to make. It's just not good. And I thought that, like, look at what I did. I was able to, she saw the point when I was saying, and I stumped her. That was a philosophical conundrum she got herself in. I'm sitting there thinking, ha, ha, ha. And then, like, halfway through the plane, she pulls her Bible out, and she's sitting there, and she's singing, and she's reading the Bible. And really, you could see something different about her. Cheery, lovely, sweet, kind, unfazed by my snarky comment, gracious to me still. And I thought to myself, this is really special. Here's a woman who just got owned, okay, logically, but she's not moved by it. And she's tapping into something that makes me want what she has. And I can't logically think about it. And I think that kind of shows like a small example of abstractions. Living your life by abstractions and philosophical syllogisms, if you will, and logical arguments and premise one, premise two, versus just a life that you wish you had. Because the woman's life is not a dead end. She's got something about her that's radiant, that's speaking to everybody else around her, and yet at the same time, the smart guy's sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm not happy. I feel like I'm at a dead end right now with my abstractions. And what Bart was saying is that's exactly the point. You can tear down as much as you want with your abstract theology, but it doesn't offer you anything that's life-giving. And
Yeah.
I think that is what Athanasius is saying, is that presence of the salt and light that is in the world. That is what Christians have to focus on, especially as we wax modern.
What place do you feel like apologetics play then in the Christian life and like speaking into the world?
Well, I think apologetics are becoming different right now. I think that the term apologetics is we offer apologetics courses, and those are fine and dandy. But if you talk to somebody, who's an apologetics student, and I have many of them, and I've asked them questions like, have you proved God? No. So you've went through it all, and you haven't been able to prove God? No. So what have you done at most? Well, we've made a better case for God. Yeah, that's great, but you really haven't proved God on modernity's on its grounds. So like apologetics, you have evidentialists, right? We have the archaeology to show it. The Bible's never been wrong. No, the text isn't wrong. I think we'll always go back and forth on those arguments. First of all, like usually people that are making bad textual arguments, atheists who haven't really studied the text, these manuscripts, there's variations. Yeah, that's textual criticism. I think textual criticism proves that we have very accurate copies of the text, and that we were, through all of the accuracies, we're able to reconstruct exactly or very close to what we think the original text suggests. I think that science is correct. But I don't think that science proves God. I think that it can make a really good case for God, but it doesn't prove it. I think that maybe the way that, like the book that I've written, Unashamed plug right now, looks at faith from an existential point of view, not trying to prove it through evidence or not trying to prove it through like the different arguments, like the fine-tuning argument and these types of things, but really trying to say, hey, okay, we'll grant you that we can't prove it. So take atheism and run with it. Now, let me show
Yeah.
you what's going to happen to you. Now, Dostoevsky, I mean, I always go to him, he's my guy. He was deeply concerned about the Russian nihilistic movement that was taking place in 1840 and more violently in 1860. And this was coming on the heels of modernism. Russia was becoming modern in the way that they were thinking. And he saw that if you try to overthrow Russian orthodoxy, or the faith that was the staple of the society at that time, you are really going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. And the way he did it was he set up narrative. He built these characters who were not cheap characters. I mean, they were very real. He's had very deep insights into psychology. And he shows if you take it and run with it without God, ultimately, he has this term in his books throughout called the man God. One of the characters who's very intelligent calls himself the man God. And he's basically setting himself up to be divine. What ends up happening to him? He destroys himself and he dies like a dog. He's looked at by even because he feels that in order for the show that he has absolute freedom and absolute moral choice, that what he has to do is show that death doesn't even have power over him, and he's going to have to sacrifice himself for the rest of humanity to show that humans are free to do whatever they want, and they're free from death, and they're free from the fear of death. And he says this total collapse. So he and the other figures that are in the book look at him with disgust to show that here's a guy who's taken, we can do what we want, we can live the way that we want, humans can be free, yet it becomes a disgusting, revolting sort of death. So all these characters show that if you have absolute free will, apart from any moral framework that comes from something divine, humans will always try to take the place of the divine. And in taking the place of the divine, they will destroy themselves and society will go along with it. And that was Dostoevsky's cry. And so I think that's kind of making a case against, not for Christianity, but against atheism and agnosticism. Like, you can't go this way. And so your friend who has taken Christianity, he's saying, well, yeah, well, no, we can't have what we were asking for. I mean, we don't want God, but we can't live without God. Well, Nietzsche felt the same way. He's like, yeah, we can't prove God, but what's going to happen to society when we don't have God? And Barth would come in and say, exactly. That's why you need to understand that you can't live your life through a bunch of abstractions because you'll destroy yourself. There has to be something more to life than philosophy. And which is, I think, maybe why Robert Pippin has said at the end of his career, yeah, really, philosophy has given him really not much. So he's back into reading narrative because what meaning does philosophy give to you about the human experience? It doesn't give you much. When you ask somebody their favorite book, they're really ever going to say The Will to Power by Friedrich Nietzsche. They're never really going to say, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, because that's all abstractions. What they're going to say is The Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, something like Pride and Prejudice that actually taps into the human experience, because the human experience is much deeper. And I'll say this. So Dostoevsky's argument was, you can come up with all these rational ways of thinking, but human beings are irrational, and they're not compatible with the way that you're thinking.
Hey, I hope you're really enjoying this conversation. If you want to go deeper into this, if you want to hear the rest of the conversation, because we go into some big questions. We go into why definitions matter, right? So in a time when we have people saying a man is a woman and a woman is a man and you can be a dog and all this kind of thing, why do definitions matter? And I think what it's really going to do is encourage you, one, to be a thinker, and two, that you don't have to be afraid of what the world is saying. Guess what? The world is actually looking for what you have. That's what I think you need to get out of this. So go listen to the rest of the conversation, download the 418 app, and grab the premium. It's only $5.99 a month. It's really not that much. It's a coffee a month, y'all. One coffee, tall coffee a month. Just go grab that. Thanks for being a part of the 418 fam. We'll talk to you later.